thank you all for coming and attending. As you know, this is Bradford Lipson. He most recently worked on prom dates here at American High, but he's worked on a bunch of our projects as well as a bunch of outside projects spanning television, film, which is something we'll get into, award-winning cinematography techniques. So I will let Bradford go ahead and introduce himself to all of you.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. I have a keynote that I created, but I'll say I don't want it to be like super dry where all I'm doing is reading off of it and whatnot. So I love to get questions. And so please feel free to ask a question. And I will pause at various times if you want and ask if anybody has a question. But I'm going to just find my little PowerPoint here and go from there. Does everybody see that?
Yep. You guys are welcome
Yes.
to unmute
Yes.
at any time, or feel free to chime in the chat.
Okay. So yeah, it's kind of hard for me to, let me see how I can do this, figure this out so I can read at the same time. All right. Okay. That's odd. We'll do that. All right. Thank you very much. Oh gosh, my dog is barking. She's never done that. Not like when I'm in here. So as said, I'm an award-winning cinematographer, and I've been in the film industry my entire adult life. I've worked on numerous commercials, music videos, television series, feature films, all with a wide range of budgets throughout my career. So through my years of working as a gaffer, I was able to work for many talented cinematographers, and I acquired through that a great deal of set lighting experience that I'm able to take advantage of as a cinematographer. This often allows me to quickly assess the best approach for a production, and that also aligns with the budget at hand. So aside from my passion for filmmaking, I stay busy and active with hobbies such as photography, scuba diving, skiing, and traveling. And one of my lifelong hobbies that not a whole lot of people know about is that I love magic, and I'm a Magic Castle member. I don't know how many of you know what the Magic Castle is here in LA, but it's a very cool place to hang out. And in fact, there's that whole shelf thing over there is full of magic. So let's see here. So my path, I think it's important to kind of just know that when you make the commitment that you're going to do this. Hold on, I'm trying to find a way to get myself. Let me go back. I'm having a hard time here with moving this. Okay. So I started from scratch, and I actually started in high school. I fell in love with filmmaking. I took a filmmaking class that was actually considered a college level film class where we shot on 16 millimeter and edited, and I shot and directed a short film. And that was an invaluable experience. And it gave me enough of an edge to be able to open the door and get into production companies to start working. And this was back in Denver, Colorado. So it was a little bit of a different market and a little bit of a different place. Oh my gosh, can you guys hold on one sec? I'm so sorry. So sorry about that. So after discovering that cinematography is so much about lighting, I set out to work as a gaffer because to work with a gaffer, because I think that was the key in my mind at the time. That was the key. When I was in the film class, I kind of just, in the little things we did, lighting was the most confusing element. Okay. So in Denver, I met a gaffer. He had this great lighting company. And I started at the very bottom. Like my first day on the job was sanding apple boxes. And then eventually I worked my way into working on set. And I started working as an electrician and a grip, and learned how to kind of, in Denver, it was non-union at the time. So basically I was able to learn a little bit of everything. And I became working so hard, I basically became indispensable to this gaffer, ended up becoming his best boy. And as his company grew, I ended up taking over and gaffing a lot of projects. So that's when the door opened, and I was doing movies of the week for Viacom, and all these movies back in the old days. They called them movies of the week. So I don't know if you're familiar with that, but anyway, it gave me a lot of experience, and keeping my eye set on DPing, I moved to LA, and my first job out of the gate when I moved here was on the visual effects unit of Titanic. And so I just kept working with various DPs, growing my skills, and eventually had enough of a bag of tricks where I felt confident where I could start making my transition into DPing. So how I did that is a DP would ask me if I would gaff a show. I would say only if I can shoot. So if you can give me a day here, a day there, I'll gaff the show. And these were DPs that were pretty much invaluable to me in helping my career expand and helping me step up. So that's what I would do. Like, they would tell the producers, Brad's going to shoot and I'm going to go scout a day. So he's going to be the guy who's going to shoot when I do that. And that's how I started gaining experience working with the crew in that capacity. And then eventually was able to push myself into shooting full time. So my first show out of the gate that was a full-time show was a series called Wilfred that was on FX, and it earned me an ASC nomination, and I won. That was back in 2013, which was a huge honor and hugely shocking because that show was also shot on DSLRs. So everybody was shocked about that. Shortly after I was doing that show, I met Jeremy, and through a mutual friend, and he was looking for somebody to shoot a no-budget pilot. And so when we met, I really felt like we hit it off, and I said I'd love to do it. And this was literally like 3 days shooting a half-an-hour comedy pilot with Jeremy Garlick, and had an absolute blast. And he was impressed enough with how that all came out that he offered me The Wedding Ringer, which at the time was called Best Man Inc. So I went on and did The Wedding Ringer with Kevin Hart, Josh Gad, Kaylee Kuroko's great cast. And that was a hugely great learning experience. And that's actually why I picked some of the scenes that I picked to talk about. So as I continued to hone my skills, I secured work on TV series and films, and I kept building my credits. I've worked at this point for a wide variety of companies on dramas, dark comedies, regular comedies, etc. Some of my recent work is Legacies. I did some of that last season, and I did In the Dark. I did a little bit of Dead to Me, and I did the series with Jeremy called Best Worst Weekend Ever, and that was for Netflix. So, and these are some of the companies I worked for in the past. A lot of CW actually, and CBS. So what is cinematography? That's what I want to talk about now. So good cinematography involves the creation of arresting and/or beautiful images on screen. It can also tell us more about the character or the location. Shot composition, camera movement, and the way a DP chooses to manipulate light, shadow, and color all combine to create each production's unique photographic signature. I think that's a great definition of cinematography. I didn't write it. Actually, I found that as I was searching around. And then that leads into then what is a director of photography? I thought I would use my mission statement because as I sat here and thought about it, I thought that in today's world, it's a little bit different. So my mission statement is, I thrive on telling a compelling story through filmmaking. On today's set, the job of the cinematographer is so much more than just helping the director tell the story, finding the right lens, and creating an appropriate look. Anticipating challenges, finding creative solutions, and the collaborative process are my key goals. I think in today's world, a DP's job used to be like you show up, the director says, here's the shot I want, and the DP would make sure the camera got there and light it, and that was it. I think in today's world, you're problem solving, you're part of the problem solving, and and part of the process in such a huge way, which to me makes it a lot more fun. I actually think it's a great place to be. And by the way, these are all frame grabs from various shows that I've done. So, so what does this, before I go on, does anybody have any questions? Nothing so far? Okay. So what does this encompass? Simply put, aiding the director's vision by taking a script and turning it into the necessary images to tell the story. To do this, you manage 3 departments. You manage the camera, the grip, and the electric department. You will be directing these 3 departments on a daily basis in order to achieve your vision. It's imperative to understand the needs and the inner workings of each department. And I really can't stress that enough. You really do have to understand the inner workings of all 3 of these departments because you're in charge of them. And even though the gaffer is in charge of his team and the key grip is in charge of his team, it's super important to understand how they work and how everything functions so that you can make, sometimes you have to make a decision on a split second. You have to be, or a director changes their mind and you have to be able to very quickly capitulate and go down a different direction. You have to know whether you can or not. And that's the people that you've hired that are going to make it happen, that you can depend on them and you can ask them to do it and they can follow through or not. And you also have to know if you're asking something from above and beyond that really what the time would permit. So it's really important to understand the inner workings of these departments and getting to know what their gear is and how they operate and what it takes, okay? Simultaneously, you'll be working closely with the production designer, the art director, the set dressers, the costumes, hair, makeup, as well as producers, production managers, show creators, and showrunners. So you're on many levels, talking with the production designer about color choices and the art director as well. You could be talking to the set dresser about if there's a particular piece of set dressing that you just know is going to become problematic, or a mirror they place somewhere that's a problem. There's all kinds of things. You have to constantly be working with all these departments. Same with costumes. Somebody could be dressed in something where you're planning on doing some blue screen and now they're wearing blue. So you have to make sure ahead of time you've talked about that, make sure that they understand what you're doing, or make sure that if blue is the color and it's been established that you're not going to have a blue green screen, you're going to have a green screen. So all these things are hugely important. You have to stay up on it constantly. So one of my goals as a director of photography is to always give the director as much time as possible with the actors to shoot the scene. In fact, that's really kind of the top of the list, because if I'm taking too long with the lighting and technical execution, then the director doesn't have time with the actors, I'm no longer serving the story. So it's really about prepping. It's thinking about the logistics. It's thinking about your time management, and it's thinking about balance. And I just want to say, what will happen is when you have a rehearsal, you have actors come in with the director, there's a rehearsal, then they call a marking rehearsal. So then all the marks go down for where the actors are going to be positioned. Before second team comes in, the first AD will say, how long do you need? And if you say 20 minutes, you really should try to stick to 20 minutes, because if it's 40 minutes, it becomes a problem for them. Conversely, a first AD might say, you know what, I'm not going to have the actors for 40 minutes. So you have that time if you need it. The actors are going in the hair and makeup, and maybe it's the first scene of the day and they still have things to finish up. So you have this communication and you have this dialogue and you manage these things as you go. And that's hugely important. Any questions so far? No? Okay. So what is the process? All right. Jump this up here. I would think every person has a different process as to how they like to work on a script and begin breaking it down for shooting, but I would like to share my approach. So this is regardless of whether it's a feature film or television. So the first thing, and it's very obvious, is I read the script, but I read it without thinking about the how or any of the questions. So what I do is I let the story guide my mind's eye as I read the pages. I let my imagination construct the scenes. And if I see something or have some type of an epiphany that I might not remember, I'll jot it down. But I really try to not do that. I try to stay unencumbered. I just want to read the story and see what organically comes to my mind, because that's hugely important. When you first read a script, you will see visuals in your head, and those are hugely important, because usually That's coming partly from your subconscious, connecting with the consciousness of what you're reading. And some of what you see, you might like and want to use, and other things you might not, but it's really important to let that happen. So I will then often let it breathe for a bit. I'll put the script down. I won't deal with it anymore. I'll just let my mind wander and explore. Might not really be involved with it at all for a little while, but things will pop into your head, and then I'll start thinking about it more. Then I read it a second time and I write notes. This is when I begin to write notes down on the script pages, where I see moments where I might see a particular dolly shot or crane shot or particular lighting or a particular type of style or composition, so on and so forth. So from here, I begin to refine my vision, and then I'll write down any pitches I have for particular scenes or particular shots or any crazy ideas I have at all. So if I have references, I'll start to find those as well. And those could be paintings, they could be photographs. I might pull things off the internet. Past films, there's frame grabs that might come to my mind or particular scenes, so I'll grab those frames if I can. And this is hugely important, this part right here. I don't edit myself or question the execution and whether it can or cannot be done, or worrying about the budget or anything else. And the reason why is I don't want to edit myself into something that could have been a great approach, only to find out when it's too late that it could have been done had I asked for it. So for all of you here, it's really important to understand that we all know there's financial constraints and budgets, and it doesn't matter if you're working on a short film with a little bit of money, or a medium-sized film, or something where you have a lot of resources and a lot of money. It doesn't matter. That lot of money is still going to get allocated, and that middle budget, everything's going to get allocated, and this little bit over here, it's all the same. But if you start thinking about, hey, I would really like to explore doing something a certain way, but you're like, oh, they probably don't have the money, and you stop yourself, that self-editing ends up being a detriment to you as the DP, because it's your responsibility to try to tell the best story and bring as much as you can to the table. And this is all by learning, by the way. This is based on experience, where I have done this, where I didn't ask for something, and the producer says, well, you should have asked for it. I would have been happy to make that happen. So lastly, and most importantly, is to listen to the director. Like, sit with them and just listen to what they have to say and what their vision is and what their approach is. Hugely important just to take the time and hear what they have to say, because that will also help. You will absorb that, and you will be able to then refine your approach and be able to bring more to the table in that regard. So within the context of what we're talking about with how you work towards getting to while you're prepping, oftentimes the director will already have a lookbook or a mood board or visual deck that they created. And also, if a production designer is already hired, and oftentimes they already are, they'll maybe have made something for the director, and that's extremely helpful in informing the visual language, so that everybody's on the same page. And in fact, on prom dates that I just did, when by the time I got to Syracuse, it was really fantastic. Our production designer, who was outstandingly amazing, had amazing lookbooks already formed, already ready for all of us to see, that we could access, and it really helped a lot in the prepping process. So I ask a lot of questions. Never be afraid to ask questions, including right now to me. Take lots of notes, and figure out how you want to share your thoughts and your vision. And if the director is really collaborative, I will share my pitches pretty quickly and begin creating a general aesthetic visual language. And this is also probably about the point where I start thinking about what camera would best suit the production and what lenses would best work, and any other equipment that I think is really integral and super important. I'll start writing all those things down, and that'll become part of the process. So the key difference between does anybody have any questions so far?
have a question, Bradford. How far before production, or like how long in pre-production do you work on things like this to kind of make sure that you, the production designer, the director are all on the same page and kind of hand in hand with that timeline? What happens if there's like clashing there? How do you overcome those kinds of obstacles?
Clashing in the ideas.
Yeah, and the vision. Like if you sit down with the director and they give you their vision and you're like, oh, that's not exactly how you had envisioned it. How do you go about kind of adapting to that?
Well, so that those good questions. So good. If I heard you right, one is about time, and the other is about like how that works with like if you're not on the same page, which
Correct.
is
Yeah.
so time wise. And I actually talk about this in just a second, but I'll just say it now. On a TV series, it's very quick. So your prep time, you'll have like usually it's 3 weeks before you start shooting the first episode, and then the directors rotate in and out. And so the DP kind of becomes the person that kind of push the show forward and keeping it consistently visually, whatever it is that everybody agreed on for what the look of the show is. If it's a feature, you have like usually 3 to 4 weeks on a lower budget to, maybe, like a $5 million film to maybe a $15 million film, like 3 4 weeks. And then it goes up to like the 20 million to $30 million range. You probably have 4 to 6 weeks. And then if it's a really big film like Jeremy just did with Murder Mystery 2, that was many months of pre-production, of prepping and everything else. So it just kind of depends on the caliber and budget of the film. As far as, and this is a really good question, Andie, as far as not being on the same page, I think it's like you've been hired by the director. And so I'm going to say this first and foremost, that probably the chances of you not being on the same page are slim, because when they interviewed you, there was something that they heard and saw and liked and felt comfortable that you did see things near the same way. So in the instance that if you didn't, if you were on two opposite ends, which could very easily happen, it's really my job as the cinematographer to get the director's vision. So even if I may not like it, that's really not my place. My job is to that director hired me to get their vision, so I'm going to do it. So, and there are some directors who very much, I've worked with directors who come in and they know the millimeter, they know exactly where they want the camera, and I put it exactly there, and I really like take over with the lighting and take care of that. And sometimes they may even have a lighting note, like, can you make it a little brighter? Can you make it a little darker? So on and so forth. So it kind of just depends on who the director is and what their skill set is too. Because some directors are very camera orientated, some are very actor only orientated, and then there's everything in between. If they're very actor orientated, you're going to really be handling almost everything else. Like you're going to pick the lens, you're going to make all those suggestions and give those choices to the director. So anyway, did I answer that?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. So in this day and age, many TV series have risen to a state that is often just as complex, if not more visually dynamic than many feature films, in my opinion. There are still some distinct differences that I would like to quickly discuss. So on episodic television, if it's the first season, oftentimes there is either the pilot episode, either to shoot, or it has already been shot. So if it's been shot, the visual language might already kind of have been formulated. But that said, there's room to hone in on the various elements, refine, improve the visual language as the show progresses. Sometimes new discoveries are made as you're shooting the first few episodes, and also new requests can come in from the showrunners and the show creators. They could see something a different way or want to change the dynamics of how it's looking in certain ways. And I didn't put it in here, but we also, like on a lot of shows, you'll have a Bible, for a shooting Bible for the show, which will basically helps the director understand. We shoot the show like maybe all our masters are symmetrical, and all our coverage is all long lens from 50 millimeter on. We never shoot a piece of coverage on a 30 on like the 25 to 35. Like you could have, it could go on and on and on. Like reflections are important in every shot. Try to make try to always have more shadows or blah blah blah. You just have like, you create this Bible that is given to the director that the director then uses to guide themselves as they're prepping the episode. Okay. So television is also fast. It's extremely fast. So you have basically 1 hour episodes are usually based on an 8-day shooting schedule, and half-hour shows on a 5-day shooting schedule. 1 hour eps usually have anywhere from 6 to 10 pages per day to shoot, depending on the complexity of a particular episode or particular scene. So prepping an episode can also be difficult if there is only one DP on the show. If you are the only DP on the show, you're reading the next episode while you're shooting the current one. You're making all the decisions by looking at location photos. You're not visiting the locations. And lunch is often spent in meetings. You're meeting with the next director. You're sitting in on tone meetings with the director and show creators. It can really stretch you thin if you're the only DP, which I have done. If there's alternating DPs, then what's great about that is you're prepping with that director and you're like in their pocket the whole time. And most of what I'm about to talk to you about happens usually in the first five days of the prep. So let's just say by now you've already read the episode and you've already done your own personal creative breakdown. So now you go and you look at the locations and collectively choose what works best. So you would do this, you look at logistically and doability. Does it fit into our day? Does it fit in your other locations that you're planning on doing that day? Is it fit within our budget? Does it work for us creatively? What is required of the location? Is it rigging? Is there too much rigging? Is there truck parking nearby? Is there somewhere close by for base camp? What's the needed support equipment to get the scene? Extra equipment beyond the norm, condors, cranes, what kind of lighting? If it's an exterior, where's the sun? What's the sun control going to be like? How are you going to be able to get the look that you want with the time involved in where you are? And is there enough time to shoot? And really simple thing is sometimes directors will get out of a van to scout and they'll jump out and they'll be standing there and the sun is behind them shooting right into where they want to shoot. And my little trick is when I get out of the van, I always go to where I'm looking where it's backlit. And so what happens basically is they're standing on the opposite side, and then eventually they'll either get it or they'll say, why are you over there? I want to be here. And then it gets into this kind of gets into what you're talking about, Andie. This gets into well, I don't want it to be front lit. I need it to be backlit or half lit. So, can this location work if we're over here? And if it does, great. And if it doesn't, well, we'll talk about something else. And I'll get into that a little bit more. So you're working. So as all this is happening, you're doing these location scouts. You could be doing all of this stuff simultaneously. You'll be working with the director, breaking down each scene to make it shootable. Sometimes this is done just by the DP, since the director is being pulled into all kinds of meetings in different directions at the same time. Shot listing, oftentimes, again, depending on who the director is, the director will come in with a pretty good shot list. But it's the DP, it's my job as a DP to create the shooting and lighting diagrams to share with the department heads. And I use a particular diagram, and I put a couple in here that I'll show you in a minute, from an app called Shot Designer, which is really invaluable. I think it's a great way to kind of lay things out for everybody. So as this is all happening, you're going to go back to the locations. Once you've picked your locations, and you'll use a visual tool such as Artemis, which is app that I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but it's an app you can download on your phone that simulates basically focal lengths of whatever lenses that you program in that you want to use. So you can basically use your phone as a director's finder and find your master angle, and you can find where you think your coverage will be, and you can actually take stills and file those and share those. And the beauty is they're great references, and you can share them with other departments to say, this is my edge of frame. I will never see over here. And that can end up saving production a lot of money. Oftentimes sets get overdressed, and when you know in your mind and everybody knows that you're not going to turn around and look in a certain spot, there's no reason to dress it. So it's a hugely helpful tool. So if you don't know Artemis and it's something that is a great tool, I would look into maybe looking into downloading that. You also have to figure out your setups per scene. You have to have a consideration of how many setups per scene there is. It's essential in order to stay on schedule and on budget. You pitch the director any ideas that have come to your mind that you feel strongly about. So using my skills and knowledge, I will help the director make critical decisions about what can and cannot be realistically accomplished within the time allotted. I would also be you would work with the first AD going over the one-liner to discuss and break down each day and how many shots per scene you're going to be doing each day. And then you create your timeline. And then you'll also be working with the producers and the production manager with the budget, the equipment request, what your department needs will be between camera, grip, electric. And before you roll into the episode, they're going to ask you to give all your final asks because they want to lock it in, and they'll tell you whether they'll approve it or not. And simultaneously, you'll be working with your camera, grip, and electric department, which, by the way, they're shooting. So if I'm the alternating DP, I come in and I try to get notes to the key camera first and the key grip and the gaffer and share what I'm going to share. And we very quickly try to pull all of this together. It's very fast and furious. So if you guys don't know what a one-liner is, this is a one-liner, and this was actually from American High's prom dates. And I actually, when I'm done shooting the day, I cross it out. So that's why you see those X's. But this gives you an idea of what you're going to be looking at. So just for instance, like at the top of the screen, scene 3, interior dress shop, seniors, Jess and Hannah try on ugly prom dresses, and it gives you a page count. It's 2 pages. Scene 4, the dress shop cash register, 1 page. Then we're going to go outside, and it's exterior dress shop. Luca is a jerk because he picks up Jess from the shop, and that's 1 page. And it gives you all the information you need to know. So the first AD will say, how long do you think you need for the 2-page scene inside? The first scene there for scene 3, how long do you need for scene 4? And how long do you need for scene 5? And we discuss that, and that's how we start creating the world of like knowing what our days are going to be and staying on track. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Okay.
Anna, you can go ahead. You can unmute and ask.
Okay, sorry. My question was, so I know directors of photography have a lot of creative and technical elements that kind of go into their job. So do you find yourself being more of a technical oriented person or a creative oriented person, or both?
Both. Yeah, that's a very good question. And I actually kind of hit on that a little bit later as well. But it's definitely a job that you have to be, you kind of have to be able to know enough about everything, if that makes sense. I will share with you that if pressed, I would say I lean more into a creative DP than a super technical DP. I'm not a DP who could sit there and get into digital or get into DaVinci Resolve and color grade for myself on set, or get into any like film based or anything like that on set and be my own DIT. There's no way I could do that. So I have enough knowledge and skill creatively or technically and understand the cameras enough to be able to do the job. But I would probably say I lean more creatively when push comes to shove. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good question. So based on the shot list by the director and myself, I create a shooting order. Shooting orders are really important. So day exterior, sun movement, the time needed to execute the scene, sun control. And I just want to touch on, am I doing okay time-wise, Andie, or am I going long?
No, this is perfect.
Okay, great. So I want to touch on this. So imagine you go and you're going to shoot a big day scene, And remember earlier I said the director's facing one way, but the sun's like flat lighting and everything. But let's say when you scouted and you were looking at that, you know that at the end of the day, or later in the day, the sun is actually around on the other side and could be backlit. So you, instead of just telling the director, no, this won't work, you could actually explore the idea of what if we start with our close-ups? And if we start with our close-ups, and I can just put big solids up to block the sun from the actors, and a condor with a big overhead of negative, I can control that, and then we can actually have a sun on a condor behind them to match what's going to happen later. And then we do our masters last. So you could offer that up. Now, the trick side there is doing the master last means that your master is your roadmap for all the continuity. So oftentimes that could be tricky, but if the location is really important and that's the only place you can do it, and the director absolutely doesn't want to turn around, then that's how you can shoot it and keep the look of the show going. Because again, you are the gatekeeper of the look of the show. So sometimes, and this has happened on occasion, I'll spar with the director. The director will be like, no, I want to shoot it like this. And I'll be like, that's not the show. That's not the show. And of course, you know, being polite and politically correct, I would say, let's talk to the show creators. If they're okay with it, like how you want to present it to them, then that's what we'll do. But I just want them to understand that when they see dailies, it's not going to be the look of the show. So I think that's kind of a great way to handle the political aspect of something like that. So night exterior, what's the needed gear, the best shooting order to accommodate the gear, day and night interiors. If it's a day interior, your sun control. If you're on a day interior on a location and there's windows, and there usually are, you still have to worry about the sun and where it's going to be and how you're going to control it. If it's going to come in to the windows, and let's say you've shot half of a scene and there's no sun coming in, all of a sudden now there's sun coming in, it's going to be noticeable. So how do you handle that? Also, like when it comes to gear, like oftentimes we'll be in a position where, okay, we want to do like a crane shot. Well, is it better to bring the crane shot in first thing and have the rigging department bring that in so it's ready? Or is it better to like wait and hold off and maybe shoot like your mini master and everything else, and then have the crane come in at the end? Or let's say you could have the rigging guys bring it in at lunch. You could do it that way. You just have to find the way so you're maximizing your use of shooting time. That's what it boils down to. Any questions? Okay, so this is made from Shot Designer, and it's a really simple app, and it's great because it just gives everybody such a great overhead visual of what you're going to do. And if you look to the right, it has like what the shots are, like A camera setup 1, B camera setup 1. You see A camera setup 2, and there's no B camera there. And then in the green, it says A camera setup 3 and F B camera setup 3. And in green over here, it says save setup 3 for later. And that's because we were block shooting, meaning that we weren't going to just turn around and do that right then and there, because we'd have to maybe move the bed out and the nightstand and too much stuff to where it would slow us down. And so we know we're going to eventually have to turn around for other pieces of a scene. So we'll just do it at another time. Here was the scene breakdown from a scene that we did in the location we used for the final prom. And Andie just told me she was there and I didn't meet her. So anyway, so you could, same thing, you get the camera setups, it's a description, steady cam around Jess and Hannah. I won't go through the whole thing, but you just kind of get an idea of breaking down and thinking it through so that you're maximizing your time and you're not wasting time, and all your movement between your cameras and your lighting and everything that you're doing is being done in a way to where you're not overworking and wasting time. Okay. This is an example of a shot list without any diagrams, obviously. So it's, would be a great way to communicate if you either didn't have time or you didn't have a diagram or anything like that. So you see that first note at the top. weather permitting, we would start with setup 2 while the sun is still high. We would work our way to shooting scene 84 master last. That was because with the sun up high, it wouldn't look so good. So we would shoot the other stuff that I knew I could control the sun. And then we would back up and do the big master when the sun is low in the sky, and we get a beautiful looking scene. So that's television. Now features, there's one script, you see the story in its entirety, every department knows where it's going. It's the roadmap of what you're going to do. So collectively from the beginning, everyone can see the journey they're embarking on through prep, production, and they all already see the end. Whereas TV, you don't even know like what the next episode or 2 episodes, what they're going to throw at you. It can be totally, you just really have no idea where it's going or what's going to happen. So there's a lot, it's a whole different way of thinking. So on a feature, usually I already talked about this, 3 to 4 weeks on a smaller budget. A bigger budget can have anywhere from 6 weeks to many months, depending on the location and scope, i.e. Murder Mystery 2. So almost everything beyond that is similar to television. I would prep it the same way, with the exception that your daily page count when you're shooting is a little bit lower. Instead of the 6 to 10 pages a day, usually it could be like anywhere from like 3 to 5 to 6. It just kind of depends on the budget of the show. So like a $20 million film could be 30 to 36 days of shooting. A lower budget film could be 20 days to 24 days of shooting. So it just kind of depends on what you finally get to shoot your feature. What I think does feel better from the feature standpoint is that your prep is slower paced. So I feel like I have more of an opportunity to explore the possibilities of the visual aspects of it. You know, you can like dig into it a little bit deeper, whereas on television, it's really hard to have that time. So any questions so far? Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about intention versus reality, because it's super important to understand that I can be going into, it doesn't matter if it's a TV show or a feature, I could be going into it with a certain vision and intention for what we're going to accomplish, but then the proverbial shit happens, changes everything on the day. So for this, I want to talk a little bit about, and I use these frames that you're looking at right now to talk about exactly what I mean by this, okay? So sometimes the vision we want to achieve cannot easily be done, or it may not be able to be done at all due to a variety of reasons. So on the show In the Dark, this was up in Toronto, we had the scene that kept getting just pushed off the schedule. And the producers came to me at some point and they said, look, Brad, we only have one place we think we can put this, and we have to get it in the can before this director finishes up. And this day is huge already. Is there any way you can please go and shoot this scene with like minimal crew, minimal gear, and just get it? It's 2 people talking outside on a street at night. Okay. So I had an idea of where the location was. I had seen the pictures. I had actually driven by it. It wasn't too far from where I was living out there. And I felt confident with the cameras and the lenses that I was using on that show that I could give them what they wanted. And I understood the complexity of like, why drag all the trucks out there and everything else when we had such a big day as it was. So sometimes the budget won't allow for this, which is the most common. Can't get the right equipment or it's not available. Don't have the labor at hand to achieve what you want to do. Sometimes it's both. Time won't allow for it, which is what this particular situation was. Location limitations, set limitations, logistical limitations. Some, like you might have a light up and it breaks, or a light doesn't show up. That was a day playing light for rent. So for this particular scene, it was available light, except for one light, and I'll show you what that light was. So here's one piece of coverage. Well, obviously did a reverse. I didn't put it in here, but the first shot you saw, let's see, how do I go back? This shot, Steadicam, we Steadicammed him around to find this character Trey. So that became his coverage. And then we turned around on him. to Darnell was this guy's name. And then we did this master, then we did a wider master. And so the only light I used was I put a tube, a helio tube right here to light them. And actually, because it's overexposed, it doesn't look as green, but it was green to kind of augment this green ATM sign right there. And that was basically it. And so the producers were happy, the show creator was happy, the director was happy. We got it shot. We didn't take too much time. Everybody wins, right? So when this occurs, it's time to simplify how you get the vision or similar results. And it's our job to shoot the script, to make the day, and get what the director wants in the can. So this is exactly what I was just talking about. So you have to be realistic about what you can truly achieve. And you always have to be thinking about the shooting schedule, your time, your labor, and your equipment. Those are always things that should be on your mind, because you can have too much equipment for the crew size. You can have not enough equipment for a particular set. You might not have enough labor. You know, there's all these things piece into one another, okay? So now translating the script into a vision. Every scene has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's incumbent upon us to find and know the story being told in every scene. So when you read a script, every one of those scenes has a beginning, middle, and an end. And every one of those scenes is really about, like, what is it about? What is the scene about? And that's, as a cinematographer, you have to ask yourself what it's about, okay? The second part of being a cinematographer is really understanding what cinematography is. And there's an old book here, and it's called The 5 C's of Cinematography, but it's a really relevant book, and I still highly recommend it. It's still in print. They make newer versions of it. And there's other newer books that are similar, but this particular person, Joseph Maskelly, he wrote this many moons ago, and it is so relevant and important for cinematographers to understand. The 5 C's of cinematography are camera angles, continuity, cutting, close-ups, and composition. And we're just going to, again, these are very broad stroke overview kind of ways of looking at this because of the time in this class. You could spend many hours just talking about each one of these 5 C's. So camera angle that best tells the story. So the master angle informs the viewer of where we are. So where are we right now? Anybody?
In an office?
Exactly.
Newsroom?
What'd you say?
Newsroom?
Could be a newsroom. It's an office of some sort, right?
Yes.
Okay. We find out once, but we do know we're in an office. That's the most important part. We do find out specifically what kind of an office it is as the scene unfolds. And I think we did a dolly shot from left to right as this was happening. I think this is the master frame opening. So continuity, make sure the actions and props overlap and match from shot to shot. Camera angle and focus tell the viewer the phone is important in this shot. So that gets into camera angle as well. Cutting, knowing the cutting pattern for the scene. You have to, as a cinematographer, especially if the director is not really strong in this way, you have to be able to know the shots that you set up are shots that can be cut together and create a cutting pattern in your head of how you would see this finished, so that you're not wasting time. Because if you're doing, like, if you did this shot and then you went in just maybe like a tiny little bit, it would feel like a jump cut, right? It would just like suddenly just jolt forward and it'd be weird. But if you switch angles and you change your focal length, then you can cut easily between the two, and it's also more interesting. So highly important for that. Composition, find frames that are balanced and visually interesting, especially on master shots. I love this frame because it's very Kubrick. It's a very, very much a symmetrical, perfectly down the middle. We actually took a tape measure and went from side to side and went from top to bottom, and we found the exact center, and that's where we put the lens. So study master directors and DPs. Wait, pardon me? Say that again?
I think it was unintentional.
Okay, so directors such as Sidney Lumet, Stanley Kubrick, Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, Alfred Hitchcock, Coppola, Nolan, all these, and of course this is a very quick list, but there's directors you love, films that you love, like really study their work and study how they edit and cut things together. DPs such as Roger Deakins, Caleb Deschanel, Rodrigo Prieto, Robert Richardson, Emmanuel Lubezki, Hoyt van Hoytem, Rachel Morrison, Mandy Walker. These are all people doing extremely phenomenal high-end work that is really worth delving into. And I will say, when you watch, if you watch a film, sometimes the best way to watch a film to study it is to turn off the sound and just visually watch it. It's a super great way to look at something. You'll notice so much more because you won't get pulled into the story, and you can really pay attention to the lighting and the composition, where the camera placement is, because there's so much involved in this. You know, how high a camera is, how low a camera is, especially in coverage moments, what you're trying to convey to the audience at the same time. It's all super important. Study and learn composition, various techniques, and most importantly, experiment. Here's just a couple other shots from shows that I've done with various overhead shots and coverage piece. I think this is like a really strong frame, forcing him to the right like that. Study lighting, watch the classics, learn what hard lighting is, soft lighting is, high and low key, what that means when somebody says, I want my film to be a high key show as opposed to a low key. It doesn't mean the height of the light, it means a whole other thing. Understand color contrast, which gets into Kelvin temperature, understand how to manipulate that and use that to create more three-dimensional images. So it's like really important to take the time to learn these things. And also, I'll just a quick little opinion of I think because of LED lighting, where lighting has gone in the last few years, so much of everything like is lacking hard light now. And I kind of miss that. Like, it's like, where's the hard light? And so I try to push hard light in as much as I can when I can. But LED lights just become so much the norm, and it's all very soft. There's not any like really hard pinpoint kind of lights like in the old days. Any questions so far?
I have a question about when you're talking about the 5 C's and you said cutting. I know that you know Janelle Boone. When I was on my first set, she described to me script supervising is like being an on-set editor. Do you feel that your job is very much that way too, considering that you have to take into account different cutting patterns and things like that?
Absolutely. And I actually meant to bring up that it is the script. Thank you for mentioning this. It is the script supervisor's job as well. And they're a great gatekeeper. And when you have an amazing script supervisor like Janelle, I loved working with her. She was so great. She kept me honest, because I would go to her, like there was just a couple times when usually I'm pretty good about like screen direction when an actor's looking off screen to look at something. But there's always those tricky moments where it's like, well, technically she should be looking camera right because the person was camera right, but where the camera is, it really feels like it's in the wrong spot geographically, and looking camera right would look like she's looking too far. So we're going to have her look camera left. And Janelle would say, that's exactly right. That's where she needs to be looking. You have it right. Or just the opposite. Like, I'll think that, and then she'll be like, no, it's going to cut weird. It's going to bump. So you work together on that, but it is the DP's job to really know cutting patterns. And like, it's important to know, because also you want to be able to, like, as you're cutting something together in your head when you're shooting a scene, you could say, we're really missing this shot. We really need the close-up of his hands crumbling up the paper and throwing it away. That's like really important. If we don't get that, it's not going to allow you to come around to this side for you to get the look on his face. It's going to be like this weird cut. So like, it's, what I'm just making stuff up, but that's like, you definitely have to know and kind of understand editing enough so that you can help in that way, because 9 times out of 10, even if you say it and everybody says we don't have time for it, I will tell you, I don't have enough fingers to tell you how many, could count how many times I have brought this up, and like on a show, it's like you get the list. Oh, we owe this close up, we owe this shot, we owe that shot. All the things that you knew you really needed, but you didn't have time for it, they have to go back and get. You would have just been better off like trying to get it as fast as you could at that particular moment. So that's what I have to say about that. So go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I didn't have a question, but I just wanted to let you know I had to leave at 8 for class. So I just wanted to thank you for your time and let you know I really enjoyed learning from you.
Oh,
So,
you're so welcome.
I didn't want you to think I just left.
Oh, no problem. I understand.
Thank you for
Thank
coming,
you.
Kate.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Okay, so I would venture to say that almost any DP would say the most complicated part of the job is lighting. So one's ability to quickly light a set, light the coverage, and the coverage on the turnaround is the key to a successful career. You need to be efficient, but create dynamic shots. Hugely important, because what I will tell, I can't tell you how many times when I go in for an interview where either the producers, the directors, or both say, we hear you're really fast, because that's more of their, of course they want it to look good, but that's like the comment they'll make. We hear you're really fast. Lighting is the most integral part of the whole process, and you can paint yourself into a corner with lighting and really mess yourself up quickly and really put a kink in the day if you don't really know the lighting process and how it works. And I picked this frame, guys, just because I thought like it's like looks so benign, right? Looks like the lamp is lighting the two of them, and you can quickly see they're in some like tall building with the city behind them, correct? Right? So, but that's not what happened at all. So the lamp, I had to dim the lamp so far down to keep the texture and not have it look blown out, that it wasn't lighting their faces. So I took a China ball, and above frame, there's a China ball with a teaser behind it, so it didn't light any of the walls that you see. So that's what's really lighting their faces. And then the cityscape out there is actually forced perspective sticks that I had construction make, and well, I would say grip and electric make. They basically made this forced perspective, these frames. And this is from my bag of tricks that I learned from a DP when I was a gaffer. And we put twinkle lights all over it. And then we color some of them red, and then we have them brighter in the foreground and dimmer in the middle, and then they fade off darker in the background. And that gives you the perspective that it's a city, when it's really just like twinkle lights on these frames sitting on stands out there, and then duvetine behind them. It just goes to black. And these little white things, specks you see, we had it snowing out there, so that's what that is. And it looks odd because of the motion blur, because these are frame grabs. So it just looks like a really, oh, this is really simple, the lamp is lighting them, but it's not. And that's a great example of like, how can I make something look dynamic in a heartbeat? And also they didn't want to spend the money on a backing, so that's what I did instead. So it gave us something a little more dynamic than just nothing at all. So now we get into the, oh, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just have a quick question.
Mhm.
So when you work with color in terms of lighting, how does that connect to when the editors do stuff like color correction? Do you communicate with them?
So the editors aren't really supposed to mess with it. So what happens is, usually I'll work with the DIT and we'll have lookup tables, like I'll create LUTs to shoot on, then through that we'll create lookup tables for the specific scene. And then the post-production, we've created our workflow, we've tested our workflow, and that goes with our day of shooting. They get all that information. It's all metadata that they get, and then it gets connected to it. And the editor really just gets the dailies. They get their down res version of the dailies that they're going to use in the Avid or whatever it is they're using, and they're not really supposed to mess with it. That doesn't mean that they sometimes don't, or they like think it's too dark, so they like will like bring up the exposure of something. but normally they don't. And then what happens is basically final color grading. I'll sit in on the final color grading. If I'm on a show out of town, I'll either be on an iPad and seeing it in real time through the iPad. And I've also like sent notes. Like basically what happens is the colors will color grade the episode on their own, and then they send it to me, and then it has a burn-in of time code, and I'll write down any notes that I have, and then we sit together and go through all those notes and fix anything that I think needs to be fixed or changed or anything like that. So that's usually how it works. Once in a blue moon, an editor might mess me up. More importantly than color grading, what editors do is they'll change the frame. So they'll either do zooms, on camera dollies, so to speak. They'll, do that, or they'll go in or change the frame. And that sometimes bothers me if it's a frame that was really specific. Other times it's like, okay, they just needed to go in and it needed to be closer. Or sometimes I'm on a show where we pick a shot that's like not too wide, not too tight. It's like a mid-range shot, and that becomes the close-up, the closer shot. So we know like they're just going to go in and blow it up into that. So, and I'm okay with that. Like if I'm shooting, I know I'm shooting at a high enough resolution that it's okay. I'm okay with that because there's no reason to really have to repeat it with a tighter lens if you don't have to. But that's a very good question.
Thank you.
So curious to, so before we roll the scene, and this is a long scene, so we're not going to get into it. We're going to just play some pieces. Andie's going to play some specific pieces and we can talk about it more. But first, I just want to hear from you why you think I chose this scene.
I thought like what was interesting from the scene and why you chose it was because in the beginning, like the guy she's talking to is like totally out of focus for a lot of the shots. And I thought it was maybe trying to show us like what she sees because she's blind, so she can't see him yet. And so we as the audience don't get to see him yet.
That's exactly right. You nailed it. So before we play the scene, does anybody else, well, since she nailed it, there's no reason to ask anybody else, but when I talk about that every scene has a story, a beginning, middle, and end, let's just break this down for a minute before we go on, okay? So the beginning, Murphy is lost. She's in an unknown foreign place and she's blind. Once Murphy sits down and is told someone is sitting in the booth, she hears it's a teenager and she starts to formulate a plan. The middle is Murphy realizes that she can manipulate this kid and get what she wants. And the end is she's successful at getting what she wanted. So again, Murphy is blind. It's exactly what you said. We wanted to show, we really wanted to exemplify the fish out of water storyline here. This person blind being in a foreign place that she doesn't know. And how did we accomplish it? And we did it via making use of shallow depth of field, okay? I also put diopters on the lens to even throw it further out of focus so it looked even more weird. So that's how we did. In fact, this whole episode, there's the episode before this ends at a train station, and then the beginning of this starts at a train station. We kind of did this whole same technique through it, and I thought it was really a really dynamic way to go. All right. So can we go ahead and play those pieces of the scene and pay close attention, okay? So did you notice any other techniques that were used there besides what I was just talking about?
I noticed one. I noticed that the camera height was used a little bit in part of it, to show like the power dynamic between them, and she was like manipulating him in a way because she's older.
That's exactly right. The other thing that I did was we made a really strong effort to do as much of it as we could handheld and close to her, so that we were just kind of rolling around her handheld and just kind of working it like that. And then in the middle, it jumps to the first time where it's a longer lens shot and it's a solid shot. And that was to kind of signify that she's starting to make inroads with this guy, and she's starting to connect with him, and he's listening to her more. And because it disconnects from that close-up, and it's now at a different place at a different focal length. So that's kind of like the foretelling of what's going to happen, so to speak. So those were two more techniques that we used. Okay. I felt like the director made a really bold choice that worked extremely well to never focus on a teenager in the conversation. But did you notice what happened at the end?
Did he become unblurry the moment that he gave in to her? Like he said, like, okay, I'll do it.
Yes. And what's hidden in there, and what's really hard to pick up on, is I used a device called a cine fader. So, and kind of what makes it harder to pick up on is because we rack focus to him, but when we rack focus to him, the people behind him are still pretty out of focus. So I'm going to show you the example. So there's the shot where he's out of focus, everybody's out of focus. And then here you can see he's a little more in focus. Then here we roll focus to him. But the cine fader, what I did is I created more depth of field in camera. And the device is basically a computerized device that takes two variable NDs and spins them against each other. So basically, I had those closed down and darker, so I had to be opened up more on the iris. So everything was like what I was shooting wide open, so everything was much more out of focus. And then when we racked to him, I had it so they spun to a place where I had to actually iris down to a 5/6 at the same time, which was a much deeper stop. So everybody in the background is also much more in focus. And it's very subliminal, but it's very much a useful tool because it really helped play that scene out. Any other questions about this scene? Oh, and lighting wise, did anybody have any questions about lighting? Because we're really not focusing on lighting very much, but basically I'll just share with you to light this. What I did is I had 18,000, two like 18,000 watt lights outside on high stands that came through these windows. Do you see my mouse when I move it? Okay. And then I had I think it was a 9K to come through this center window, and I had some diffusion on those, so it wasn't like super hard light, as you can kind of see how it is. I also used atmosphere inside so it picked it all up a little bit and diffused the shots. And then I basically had just the practicals on, and I had these fluorescent lights put underneath here. None of this was really here. So I had the electric department put all these fluorescents in, and you don't see it here, but there's some stuff in there that we had going. And then obviously all these little practicals work to our advantage. And then what I did is I used warm light for like when I was on the front light, shooting her from the front, you could see she had warm light on the camera side as if it's from those overhead practicals. And then everything else is that daylight. And when we got into the coverage, I put this beam up here that you see right up here. I mounted lights up there. So basically we started the day, this gets into exactly what I said. We started the day with this wide shot, did all the wide stuff. There was actually a whole other scene that they ended up not using in the episode where she comes to the counter. So it made sense to start with this wide shot. And then we jumped into the scene that you just saw. And it only took like about 10 minutes for the guys to put the lights up along here that I wanted to kind of carry that daylight as if it was coming from the windows. So that's how we did that. Okay. The wedding ringer. Why do you think I chose this scene? Any thoughts? Anybody want to chime in? Again, no right or wrong answers.
The reflections look tough, but cool.
They were cool. Okay, so we're going to get into this, but I'm going to first bring up a little context. So director Jeremy Gerlich challenged me. That's basically what happens. Here's what he presented. He said, Brad, I want to shoot the quiz scene on the balcony at dusk. Now, did all of you read the script pages before you watch the scenes, I hope? You probably noticed the scene. I think it says kitchen in the script. I believe it says kitchen. That's where the scene takes place. So that's the script I had. It said kitchen. So he's like, here's what I want to do. You guys, I don't know how many of you know Jeremy, but he's like, Awesome. He's like, I want to shoot the quiz scene on the balcony and I want to do it at dusk. And we're only going to have the one evening to get the entire scene. Can we do it? Can we do it? Oh, but I also want to have a camera, a big wide shot inside that I can cut to and see them out there. And then when it's night, I want to dissolve to night and do the scene where they're inside at night. And then I want to dissolve to the next morning and play that. So you guys all saw the scene, right? So that's what he was asking of me. Is it possible? So what I knew is that comedy plays better in wider coverage. So I started formulating a plan in my head. And of course, this is in our prep. And I think I had 6 weeks of prep on this show. So I was able to think about it and go back to the location and lens it and give it some thought and go, yes, I can do this. I know exactly how I'm going to do it. So what is this scene? What is this scene about? So, oh, where am I going? Sorry, guys. I really got behind there. Okay. What is the story we are telling in this scene? The beginning, Doug and Jimmy have been working. They've been hard at work. Jimmy has been quizzing Doug with the questions until everything is memorized in order to be able to pull off the golden tux. Okay. So that's basically the beginning. The middle of the scene is that as Jimmy continues to quiz Doug, Doug is beginning to feel like he's bonding with Jimmy and that they are becoming friends, despite the earlier warnings that Jimmy gave him about that they're never going to be friends. He's also starting to feel better and better about things. So by the end, they've been working really hard and they have fallen asleep in the living room. You see them, they wake up the next morning and they need to get ready to go to Doug's fiance's house for this wedding catering event. So Doug is feeling really good about things by the time that next morning rolls around. So that's what this scene is basically about. So I think at this point, we should roll on it. So what I had to think about if I was going to pull this off is where I could situate the actors and how I could situate the actors. So here's a frame grab of Josh Gad's coverage, right? And then I think you already saw the frame of, there's a frame of Kevin Hart's coverage. And of course we were able to get in tighter, okay? So how do I pull this off? I want to give the director what he's envisioning, but I don't want to compromise the quality as much as I can. What is it I can do? So the reason why I picked this scene is because the shots were dictated by the way in which we could shoot it, where we can place the cameras and the approach that we could take. So before I talk more about it, how would you, or does anybody want to chime in? Like, how would you approach this? Anybody have any thoughts on this? Okay, so here's how I did it. All right, I had 3 cameras. Basically, The Wedding Ringer was a 3-camera show, but the shot that you see here is the lock-off shot. I caution taped it. We had it locked off really strong. We had all kinds of stuff on it so nobody could touch it, and that was the lock-off shot that you saw that was used through the entire scene, right? And behind the table on this side, and this was all thought of in prep, behind the table on the patio is a camera on a dolly, and I hung duvetine. I had the grip department hang duvetine. There's a big piece of duvetine right back here that's hiding the camera operator and the dolly operator. They're all hanging out back behind this dolly, okay? And I had a zoom lens on that so I could very quickly go from our widest size to our tightest size. Over here, where this column is and this planter, which I asked for ahead of time, we had a second camera set up there again on a zoom. So, and the operator was just enough hidden by this stuff here, so we never saw him, okay? And both of them had the ability to zoom in as much or as little as Jeremy needed it. And so between those 3 shots, between those 3 cameras, we were able to get the shots. That's how we did it. All right. And let's see, do I have another example? Okay, so here's the fun thing. So that scene was literally supposed to be just them sitting and standing in the dusk light. And then Jeremy just kept improvising with them and doing stuff. And I wasn't really prepared for this at all. It wasn't in the script. So why would I really have thought to be prepared for it? But it was a great learning experience for me to be more prepared, be over prepared. I had one light on that balcony that was over out of frame over here, and I used it to light Josh Gad when he was sitting on the little sofa there, the outdoor sofa. And so once it started to get dark, I kept having the electricians put scrims in the light to dim it down as much as they could. And it was a daylight fixture, and I couldn't dim it anymore, and it was way too bright. So I basically had them turn it off. And Jeremy just kept saying, "Hey, can we keep shooting?" Well, it looks so good. I was like, hell yeah, let's keep shooting. I felt comfortable with the cameras we were using. They were Sony, at that time, F55s and F65s, which was the precursor to the Sony Venice cameras. But I really felt strongly like we would get great stuff. And I knew that Kevin Hart was going to be underexposed, but he's silhouette. It's okay. Everybody knows who he is. And the scene was so great with the improv that Jeremy and the actors were creating out there, that it was worth it. And look how it's in the movie, and people love that scene, and it looks good. So I was, in the end, like, I'm so glad I didn't say no, just because I didn't have enough exposure on Kevin Hart's skin to where I could see detail on him. And I do hear, though, the HDR version, which I've never seen, I hear you do get to see that. So that's rather interesting. Any questions so far? Okay. So the kidnapping scene. What is this scene about? The beginning, Doug gets ambushed as he leaves work and is abducted by two of the groomsmen. He doesn't realize who they are, so he's afraid. The middle, the truck takes off. The momentum makes him roll out of the back of the truck and onto the street. Without realizing how much danger he's in, he crosses the busy street as traffic is whizzing by him. In the end, he miraculously makes it across, only to trip on the curb and land on his head. So this is really all about slapstick, which is why I chose to do this scene, because it is merely just like, how can we make a funny scene that really, the scene is only there to be able to get Doug from it's really to transport Doug to the bachelor party and introduce him in the bachelor party in a fun way, which is, I don't know if you've seen the film, but basically, it starts with I think the camera's like got the material over it. It starts like that. So it's basically like, where am I? What's going on? Then it turns into the crazy fun bachelor party. So this is a scene about like, how do you shoot something in a way that really exemplifies and helps make the comedy fun. So, okay. So when I read this, let's see, did I skip one? Okay. How did you see the scene in your mind's eye as you read the script? When you read the script, what techniques were employed? Do you think the visual choices helped tell the story? Can you think of some other choices that could have been made to help tell the story? So those are all things I would like you guys to think about. You don't have to answer here, but I'll share with you, when I read this scene in my mind's eye, I kept seeing like this shot, this frame here, that's what I kept seeing. So I pitched it to Jeremy, and Jeremy loved the idea. So we went to the stunt team. They loved it. They figured it out. And that's how we did it. So let's play the scene real quick. Okay. So the technique that was used is two cameras handheld, as you can see, for the kidnapping part. And I had a third camera on a hi-hat across the street that was kind of hidden by other cars and stuff. So that was used for some bits and pieces, and for when the truck actually pulls out and goes away. And we just coordinated everything. So the two camera operators were shooting opposite of each other here, and we're staying out of each other's frame. And then when the truck pulled out, they knew to get out of the way so that it wasn't in the third camera's shot across the street. So that's how that was done. Also, of course, the camera mounted on the hood, which was the funny shot that you saw where he rolls out. So that's basically how I did it. Had the camera rigged on the hood, had the crane on a bridge. So the camera was able, when we jumped to that portion of the stunt where he's running across the street, third camera went upstairs, was on that crane shooting straight down. The other two cameras covered him crossing one from this side angle, one from the front, and then he does the trip, and we were done. And you know, we had a lot to shoot in a short amount of time. So I think we did 2 other scenes that day, I believe, I feel like. So anyway, that's how I plan that out. That's me getting the shot ready on the hood of the truck. Okay, the wedding.
Bradford, do you find that the 5 Cs that you mentioned earlier, do you find that they're typically balanced, or like in scenes like that, I feel like cutting is super important, and you're talking about in the balcony lighting. Do you find that they tend to be balanced, or one tends to take the lead depending on the type of scene?
It depends on the type of scene, and I'm going to say this for handheld, when you're kind of in a sense throwing caution to the wind in a scene like that, where your handheld is going to be really dependent on exactly how the actors are playing it. You're going to be throwing some of that balance out, because you're more interested in the comedy of it and getting all the beats rather than making a perfect frame. And I've done handheld that's also very balanced and very specific, because the actors are hitting very specific marks, and you know that the frame's going to be balanced with everything you're seeing, with whatever's behind them and where they land. But in a scene like this, where it's just basically action, there's no way you're going to control that. So that's a time where with the 5 Cs, you would let that maybe aspect go a little bit, because all you're trying to do is shoot the comedy part of it. But good question. So moving on to this piece, the wedding ringer, the speech. What is the scene about? What was the director trying to convey? Do you think the visual choices helped tell the story? Did you notice anything in particular about how this was shot? When you read the script and the page count, what considerations were you making? Like, what would you think in your own head? Does anybody want to chime in on that or not? Okay, so what's the scene about? Beginning, Jimmy is doing his best man shtick, but as he's speaking, he comes to the realization that he needs Doug as a friend just as much as Doug needs his friendship, and that his life is rather empty as the wedding ringer. In the beginning and the middle, Doug is coming to the realization that he cannot go through with the wedding. He sees that Gretchen doesn't love him. He now knows what he needs to do. He blows up the lie. And the end is the chaos that ensues. And again, that becomes very comical and comedy orientated, where, you know, it's all the craziness and the hijinks at the end as they make their great escape. But Jimmy does so at the end by talking to Allison and making sure he gets a future date with her. So this is an important moment where Jimmy and Doug connect, and this is the scene where it really had to pull on the audience's heartstring. This is kind of the moment for the bromance part of this. So let's roll it. Let's play the scene. It's a huge page count. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of beats. There's a lot of things to shoot. We had, I think, 2 days to get this portion of what you just saw, basically. There's like a lot of other things that we shot and danced and all kinds of stuff, but I feel like we had close to 2 days, maybe a little less. But again, 3 cameras. So it was just all way ahead of time in prep, going to the Biltmore Hotel and lensing it all out. And I actually, for this shoot back then, I don't even think Artemis was around. I used my DSLR and just framed it all up. And I think I still have a file with all of those. And we are very close to what we prepped with the stills as to what the movie became. But what I did is I basically found a way to, like, okay, I'm going to have one camera up high, I'm going to have one camera down low, medium shot kind of sort of thing. And then I'll have one camera right to shoot across this way. And we went through the scene. Then we moved 2 cameras behind the bride and groom table, and and 2 different focal lengths, and one camera tighter straight in that could dolly in. And then we had to get around the table and dolly in on Jimmy. And then we just went to the backside. We just basically shot all 4 sides, and that's how we got all that coverage, shooting at different focal lengths. And lighting wise, what I did was I asked set dressers and the production designer to come up with some kind of table kind of centerpiece that could light up, and they really hit it hard, if you can see those, and very ostentatious and over the top on purpose. And that enabled me to get some lighting. I'm sorry, let me go back real quick. And I used like lights back here to uplight just to give it some, give it some class and sexiness back there. And I had 2 balloons that were floating up on the ceiling that were warm that I could use accordingly. And then I had a variety of lights on balconies with these 12 by diffusions that I could turn on when needed for various instances. Not everything was working all at once most of the time, but everything was there so we could work really quick. As we talked about, the use of long lenses helped to connect the characters. Dolling in was really important. And I think Jeremy and the actors really hit the tone of it with the pulling on the heartstrings. I saw you guys smiling and excuse me. So you kind of like get where it all comes together. You see the moments of realization. And so that's basically, as a DP, like my job to help him get those scenes. So basically this is everything I just said, so I don't need to go through all that. So I'll just kind of sum things up like this. The job of the cinematographer, I'm so sorry, is part artistic and creative. Technical skills, you got to be good with lighting. You should study light. You have to be able to recreate the light that you study or see. You might be at a restaurant having dinner with a friend and you're like, wow, I really like the way this looks. You file away in your memory bank. How can I recreate that moment? Like you get on a job, oh, we've got a restaurant scene. Ooh, that lighting would be perfect. How do you make it happen to be the same thing? You also have to understand how to light an actor for beauty, because that's going to come up many times. Camera, you should know the chemistry or the technical aspects behind imaging. You should be able to understand camera movement, how to make a camera move in all the various ways in which it can in this day and age. It is many different ways, and it is amazing what can happen. And the cameras that you can choose. You should learn about blocking actors and understand how important it is to know blocking, because what's going to happen is you're going to get with a director who blocks a scene and he has an actor come around a certain way and that adds a setup. And you, as the DP running the show, have to be able to say very quietly and cautiously and politely to the actor, you know what, can we just have him come around over here instead of come all the way around to this side of the table? Because it'll help save us a setup. And right away they get it and they're like, absolutely, yes, let's have them come over. It's very, directors they have their thing going on. They don't always see that. And so it's really important to make sure you understand blocking so that you can help with that. It's a big thing. You should know lensing and you should know lenses. You need to be a manager. You have to manage time. You have to manage people. You have to have good leadership skills. And you also have to be really good at politics, because that's basically what happens. So never stop learning on this journey. Okay, experiment. Today's world of technology at our fingertips. You can shoot with film. You can shoot a film on your iPhone. So do it. Like work, like make things. It's amazing. Watch classic black and white films, as I said before. Study how lighting, camera angles, and movement were used, because all of that is the foundation of what we're doing today. Lighting is key, as I just said. So in the old days, it was all about exposing the film. It was a necessity. Like lighting had to happen, otherwise you would have a pitch black image. So not only were they lighting out a necessity, but then they also had to make the actors look good. They had to make the set look good. So looking at old films is really amazing, because you have an appreciation for lighting in a whole different way. So I really, really would suggest that you guys go back and watch some of those films. So in today's world, with the way cameras are, lighting is really not necessarily as much of a necessity. I mean, clearly, if you're on sets on stage, you have to be able to light from scratch. There's basically nothing there. But all in all, though, you can still like turn on practicals and be on a location and not have to do too much lighting. It's more about like the drama and what you're trying to create. So there's that. So I quickly just wanted to, and again, I know we're running a little behind. I kind of just wanted to like show you some examples of things I've been thrown into. So did I share this with you earlier? I don't think I did, right? So this is a set on a stage. It was a day exterior that we did, that the camera starts even wider than this, and you can notice the steam on the frame at the bottom right over here. and the way it's all dressed. And I had fans, so the actors had some movement on their hair. But it really has to be convincing. This had to be totally convincing, and there's her close-up. But here's the rub. This set got built so high that it went to the ceiling of the stage. This was up in Toronto, and it wasn't like a big giant sound stage. It was more like a warehouse. So I had asked that the gaffer, could we put a 12K up there to do sunlight? And he said, no, we'll start a fire. So this is where knowledge and basically building skills from my days of when I worked as an electrician, then a gaffer, because you learn from the greats out there how to do lots of different things. So I had the grip department put a mirror up above the set, a 4x4 mirror that we could aim. And then I took the light and I just pointed the light into that mirror, and that's what's creating all this sunlight back here. And then you can see that the fill light, I also had skylight from above, real soft light coming down. And then any fill lights coming from the camera was cooler. All that light is cooler color temperature. And that's what creates the illusion that you were outside. And I think it looks pretty good, right? Any questions? Okay, here's another scene. This was actually out on a soundstage as well. This was a set in Albuquerque on a very small, low stage. And I did the second season of this show. The first season, the show creator didn't like the way this set looked because he said it just always looked like blobby light. So I completely changed how we were doing it. And I think this is pretty convincing. And you get a sense that you're outside. This is like a New Mexico type of house where there's like a courtyard in the middle and the house totally surrounds it. And so created a whole different way of making this look. And you can see the color contrast. When I talk about color contrast, the color from the camera is cooler and the color from above is cooler. You can see how this is kind of feels cooler. And then you see the warm sunlight, and that's what gives you the illusion that you're outside. Here's another version of that same set to play like outside there. And another shot. This was really cool. This is the same show. This is supposed to be a Middle Eastern country president, and he is in New York City, and the lead character in this show, played by Nick Nolte, is ex-president of the United States. He'd been ex-president for like 10 years or something. And he has come to ask a favor of this guy. Well, when we were scouting, we couldn't find any hotel in Albuquerque at all that could possibly look like a New York suite that a president from another country would maybe be staying in. But our production designer was absolutely phenomenal. And she actually realized while we were staying in a hallway that she could turn the hallway into this great room with set dressing. So these windows aren't really windows. There were doors to like a big storage room and a hallway. And so they took the doors off, and I put like day blue back there, I think, and some ficus plants, or I don't know what's out there. And I lit it to give the illusion that we were obviously in a hotel on an upper floor somewhere. And that's how we did that. So this set was from In the Dark. Again, this is on stage. I had a backing design specifically for this set. I worked with the production designer and art director to get it right, and all the specific aspects of it exposure-wise. And then there's a whole rig outside of here to give the illusion that there's a sky and skylight just coming down and coming into the room from these large windows, as well as soft pushes coming from outside above to give the illusion of the light coming in. And then as you can see, there's like a practical off screen here that I used to motivate warm light. So those are kind of those types of things. This is another stage set. This was a show for Jeremy called Best Worst Weekend. It was on Netflix. And again, just having to like make a place look real. How do you make a set that's in the middle of nowhere real? Just like if all these lights were off, there wouldn't be anything. This is a police set on In the Dark, police stage set. I also wanted to show this for the lighting on her. She's very pretty as it is, but the lighting had to be such when we got into the closer that it really worked nicely on her. So that's when you have to know how to light faces certain ways. And lastly, I wanted to share this from a show from a long time ago called Finding Carter. I came in to take over the show from the previous season. And one of the reasons for this is this actress, her name is Cynthia Watros, I think it is. She was in the series Lost a long time ago, but she was not happy at all about how things were going for her. So I came in and my goal was to make her look good. And here's her close-up. And so basically the deal I made with the producers when I was interviewing for the show was, when we light Cynthia, everything comes to a complete halt. You don't come and bug me about time, because it takes time to light her to look good. So that was the deal we made, and they respected that. And every time we got into a close-up, they knew not to come to me and say, we got to hurry. Can you skimp? Can you do it a different way? They knew when it was Cynthia, we treated her the way she needed to be treated. So that's what happens. This is a scene on a stage where the key grip made these amazing things. He called them doll houses. That really looks like buildings out there, because they're three-dimensional. He made them out of foam core, black foam core, these big boxes, and cut out all those windows. And then he took magazine pictures of interiors of apartments and pasted them in there. And the electric department put little bulbs in there. And that was like one of the best illusions I've seen in a long time. It looks really convincing. Would you think? You guys agree?
No, yes, it does. It really does look like apartment buildings over there.
Right? Very cool. And again, color contrast. Notice the color contrast, the coolness coming in, coolness on them, and the warm light that is on their faces. So I always try to use color contrast. And then this was a day interior in a big warehouse. There was no sun out there. I created that. And again, we had like no time to light this. I had like 20 minutes to light this, and we did this big, huge dolly shot where we dollied from right to left to get to this place of the frame that you see. And so, it was kind of like, how do I quickly do this and make it look good and make it look dynamic and everything is supposed to be? So that's it. So does anybody have any questions? Because I know we're running out of time, but I would really love to, for people to ask questions. Anybody?
When you're in a situation where the director allows for the actors to improv, and I've heard about shoots on where you don't even know where the actors are going to go in the scene. How do you prepare for that, if you can prepare at all? Or how do you think on your feet when things change last minute?
That's a really, really good question. And I think when you're in those situations, you have to think in broad terms. And it kind of gets into the earlier question of like, is the frame balanced or not balanced? So if I was in a situation as a DP and they come to me and say, this is a show, first off, I'd have to decide if I wanted to work on something like that, and knowing the parameters. But if say this show, we're not going to give the actors marks, and we're going to really be loosey-goosey on everything, I would probably try to find a way to be as broad as I could with how we shoot it, so that, and flexible. So hire good camera operators that have good taste, with good dolly grips that have good taste and can see things as well, because they're like half of the operator. A good dolly grip is worth their weight in gold, because usually they have their little monitor, and where they land it, they land it so the coat rack is not out of the back of the head or the pole or the window frame and stuff like that. And they know, like, if it's an over, they know not to like be stacked. They know to get it just in the right place. And the actors move, they move with it. So you get good people and you light broad, and everybody comes to an agreement that we're going to shoot this in a way that the lighting isn't going to be able to be as stylized because of that. So I'm going to light probably more soft. I'm going to light more forgiving, so the actors can just move around and pretty much be anywhere within the realm of what we're doing. So that's how I would handle that. Yes.
Are we able to connect with you via like LinkedIn or email?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Please do. And I would also say, my website is bradfordlipson.com. And if you go on there, you can see like some of my recent work and more extended versions of some of these scenes and reels and whatnot and different things. And you get an idea of kind of like, it's like all stuff that my agents tell me, like, you got to do this and that certain ways. But I try to sell myself, but also like have the scenes that I like and want to present. So if you go there and look, then you can kind of get a broader idea of kind of the style I go for. And here's the other thing though, I try not to get pinned into one style. So, like Prom Dates was I used different lenses than I have on a lot of my other projects. I used the lenses that I used were basically Sigma Cine lenses, but I also used their Sigma Classics. So the beginning of the movie, I gave a whole different vibe because it's basically a flashback and then it moves forward. And so, each film you have to decide what's gonna work. I've done television with anamorphic and just, cut off the sides so I get my 16:9. And so you just have to figure out what works to tell, or what do you think helps tell the story. And I didn't even touch on this, is part of prep is most of the time is camera tests. Not all the time, but most of the time. Most of the time you're doing some kind of camera test and or testing makeup and hair, and at the same time you can fold in a lighting test with the actors. And do I have a little bit more time? Can I share just a couple more things, Andie?
Sure, of course. We can stay on. If anyone does have to go, you're welcome to hop off. I'm happy to.
Does anybody have any more questions though? Yes.
I had one question. If you're shooting like a scene where it's like a bunch of different exteriors and then the actor like strolls into a shot, to save time, like the actor waiting around, do you shoot that like at a different time or a different day, or to keep the lighting the same, do you just have the actor on standby?
Do you mean like if one particular actor only has just a beat in a longer sequence?
Yeah, like it's like the beginning of a scene, for example, and you're showing like the streets and you're showing like houses and the whole environment, and then like they enter a shot. Would you want to keep them around so that the lighting stays the same?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I would try. And day exteriors, I think, are probably every DP's nemesis in some way. Like if you're on a project where you have every tool at your disposal, you're just like golden, and I've done shows where it's like I get the two condors standard with the where I can put the overheads up with solids or whatever diffusion I deem necessary to cover them, and I can have a condor with my my backlight in it so I can create the sun, and I can keep that consistent as long as I can. And in fact, create the scene, or like create my shooting order. And I talked about this earlier, create your shooting order so that it's like, okay, I'm going to do this. And then at the end, the sun's going to be nice and low. It's going to be gorgeous. We'll pull the gear back, and that's when we'll do the big wide master. And you're golden, unless the clouds came in and you've already got this. You already did all the backlight and everything. So it happens. But anyway, yeah, so I would have them there. Yeah, absolutely. But if somebody just had a bit scene and the ADs were like, Brad, I'm not going to bring this guy in for 1/8 of a page. We're going to be here tomorrow. Can I just like can we just do a shot of him and just not have him be part of the master? I would bend for that. So, because if the director was like, I don't care, he doesn't need to be in the master, that's how I would do it. So I would absolutely. But some of the things I kind of just wanted to touch on are, like you get thrown into all kinds of crazy situations where you have to do your homework and formulate your plans. And first season of In the Dark, I didn't shoot the pilot. And the person who was taking over the show to be the showrunner when he hired me, he really wanted me to start gearing it a lot away from where the pilot was. But at all the people that the show creator and all the people that were involved in the pilot were still involved. So I kind of had to be diplomatic and careful. but we did all these camera tests, and I basically lit Murphy's apartment the way I wanted, the way that I saw it, the way my show runners really wanted me to take it. And we did all these tests, and I shot the actors, and that's when I was able to do my presentations to them on pitches with various things like the depth of field change and diopters and all these different things I had in my head to help show the visual aspect of a blind person. And so those are the things that you do. And then we all sat in a room together in editorial and watched the camera test together, and you sink or swim, and that's where that usually happens. So, or you get your notes, it's not like the end of the world. Like I know one person was not really keen on some of what I had done, but then it got whispered to me that he was not going to be on the show for long, so don't worry about it. So I just kind of let it go. But you just never know what the politics are or anything else. And then going into season 2, I wanted to switch to the Sony Venice cameras, because here you have a show where it's like everything, like it could be so dark. I mean, it's dark comedy. It has so much opportunity to do so much visually. And I really wanted to switch cameras. So I did a day of testing. Excuse me. I did a day of testing at Sony has a facility here in LA that is really great, that you can come in. They got a set, they have all your needs, and they were really supportive. And I did a full day of camera, lens, and filter testing. Now, what was really cool is the producer, the showrunner who had hired me season 1, wanted to be there. And I had reached out to Perry Matfield, who plays Murphy, to ask if she had a stand-in or somebody she knows that could stand in for her for these tests. And she said, "Oh, I'm doing it. I'm coming down." So she came down and spent the day with us, which was perfect. And I was able to like do the shot that I had in my mind's eye of, because she relies on, I don't know if anybody has seen that series, but she relies on her phone so much. And I wanted to see this. I wanted to like just have the phone lighting her. That's what I wanted. I want to see the phone, her doing her thing on her phone at night with the phone. And I wanted to light her face. And I was able to like do all those tests so I could see how far I could stretch myself with the camera gear. So I knew going into season 2, when everybody looked at that, at all the testing we did, they were like, "Holy shit, this is great. We love this." So we switched, and there you go. There I had to shoot that scene out on that street that, even though it looked pretty bright for a city street, it was actually kind of a dark corner, but that camera was able to dig in so much, and I knew it would, that it's like, oh, I just need one light for that scene. So, it was like easy peasy. So you just kind of have to, you find ways to like cover yourself and work your way into the situation that will give yourself the opportunity to do the best work you can. Does that make sense? Any other questions? Can I share one other thing then? Okay, I'm going to share one other thing. So last year I went and did Legacies down in Atlanta. And there was this scene that was written. I actually probably should have had it pulled for this, because it's such a great lesson in the whole scheme of things. But there was a scene written where, does anybody watch Legacies or seen Legacies? It's a crazy show. Okay. So you kind of, if you know it, basically what happens is there's this, and I don't remember everybody's character names, but there's this shipping container that lands in the middle of this field with this woman in it. She's chained, she's got some powers, and the doors spring open, and now she's in like this field there. Oh, it's all white. It's all white. And then as she comes out, it's this beautiful field with flowers. And it's this guy who's one of the powerful gods in the show. He has her, and they have this whole scene that transpires, and he walks around her, and they have all these moments and blah, blah, blah. And it's basically 2 people in a field talking. Well, they wanted to be there like a half a day, I think, or maybe 3/4 of a day. And so I had a techno crane, I had all the toys, I had the overhead condors, but we were on kind of this berm, and it was like really hard to shoot, like to move stuff right? So ahead of time, I told the director I was going to shoot it in a way where we would never really turn around, because all the background was the same. It was like a field of like some fake flowers, and then field, and then trees. And no matter where you look, that's what you had, right? So why take the time to really turn around? So that's what's called French overs, when you fake the turnaround. So basically what I did is the condor that was the beautiful backlight sun basically stayed in the same place the whole time. And when I did the big masters, after that, we shot one side, I would just take the actors and flip-flop them, put the camera on the proper side for the eye line, take the key light, jump it to the other side. But the backlight was always just pretty much a straight backlight, so it didn't really matter. Everybody was just backlit in this crazy world they were in, right? And it saved us a ton of time. It saved us a ton of time. And the director, who was kind of new, was like, is this going to cut? Is this going to cut? And I was like 100%. I was like, yes, it's going to cut. I wasn't like, no, I'm not sure. I was like, it's going to cut. And then after the show ended and I had come home, and I was like, I got this call from her, Brad, I saw the episode. That scene is so beautiful. It cut perfect. So you kind of have to know, you have to learn. And I guess the takeaway that I'm going to give all of you is take the time on your journey to get there. Don't say, I'm going to be a cinematographer tomorrow, because you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. Take the time to work with DPs. Take your time to work with gaffers. Learn a little bit about everything as much as you can. Take the time to work in camera. Take the time to work in grip electric. Learn those departments. I was a gaffer. I started as a gaffer. So when I ask the gaffer for something that I want him to do, or the director's throwing me a curveball and we weren't really prepared, I know when I ask the gaffer what I'm asking for. And that works in two great ways. If I ask the gaffer and he says we can't do it, and I know he could, I know he's BSing me. But the other side of that is, if he says I can do it, but it's going to take me an hour, I pretty much would go, I concur, let's not do it. We're not going to go there. So basically the skill sets that I learned along the way have made me a stronger DP than if I would have just like started in camera and just maybe have been an operator and that's it. It's like to know all the variables in between for all those departments are important. And I'm not saying you can't learn if you're in the camera department. If you are, and the path you want to take is, I'm going to start as a loader and work my way up to a first AC, then an operator, and then I'm going to DP. All I'm going to say is, if you do that, I implore you to pay attention on set. It's so easy to like grab the phone and kind of tune out. Be the person to ask the DP questions, and the DIT and the operators, everybody there. Be the person, ask the gaffer, how come you're doing that? Can I learn what lights are you learning? Be that person. That's how you're going to get there, and take the time to get there. Don't think you're going to get there, like in a year. Like really take enough time so that you learn enough, so that when you get there, you can do the job. And part of that is management, learning how to manage a big show as a cinematographer and helm a big show. Because when I'm the DP on a series, I'm the gatekeeper. And if there's two DPs, we're the gatekeepers. So we're the ones who kind of manage so much more than just our little thing, our little area. So it's important to understand that to learn that management skill, you have to have your horizons broadened to really understand all the departments. So hugely important. So take the time. That's what I would implore you to do, and go and shoot films on your iPhones and explore. You can, it's so easy. You can just edit. You can, like when I was young, I couldn't do that. It was like 8mm or 16mm or bust. So, it took a lot to experiment and play and learn and grow. But God, in today's world, it's phenomenal. So enjoy the technology and use it to your advantage, and see what can cut together and what doesn't cut together, and experiment with lighting. Even just on a DSLR or your phone, you can still look at lighting, right? And there's a lot of inexpensive gear out there now, and you can borrow things, you can play with things, you can use lamps. So this is the other thing I want to say, there's no right or wrong. The only right or wrong when it comes in is safety. Okay. And maybe one other area, if you're trying to beauty light somebody, you got to kind of study and learn how to do that. But beyond that, it's subjective. Like you could all be DPs and go and shoot the scenes we were just looking at, and we'd have all different scenes. And not any of them are wrong. It's just the interpretation of how each one of us would do it, right? So, don't be stuck on that aspect of the right or wrong part. So that's just like, let that go. Just enjoy, have fun, experiment, learn what works, what doesn't work for you, and then start building your arsenal of how you want to make things work in the future. So that's it.